Going to share a little inside baseball with you today. I guess technically today it should be inside hockey, right? Yay, Colorado Avalanche. 21 years since the last time I celebrated the Stanley Cup. I'm happy. I actually did not watch the game. Had some other stuff going on, and I have it on DVR. We'll watch it, but huzzah. At any rate, I'm going to tell you a little bit of inside baseball, talk radio inside baseball today, for a couple of reasons. One, we're going to talk about another show, which I don't necessarily like to do. I'm not shilling for the other show. That's not what I'm saying. But the other show was in the news, and it bothered me enough that I needed to talk about it. The truth of the matter is that all talk show hosts, we don't like to admit this, but we do listen to other shows. We listen to other shows for a couple of reasons. One, we genuinely like and are friends with the other person. For example, me and Bill Mick, me and Steve Zabin, that sort of thing. We enjoy it. It's relaxing to us. We find it an opportunity to be a listener for once instead of being the host, and it's kind of good. The other reason you listen to shows is to gain experience and gain knowledge, gain experience points. Look what he's doing. How does that work for me? I'll give you a great example of this is Rush Limbaugh's program. Most of you will not know this, but Rush Limbaugh, his show starts the hour, it's dead, at 6 after. 6 after, you went to 5 after is the news, 1 minute national break, and then at 6 after his show would kick in. Well, if you paid close attention, you'll notice that he always, that first segment, that monologue segment that he did, it always went past 20 after, always. Now, when I started in the biz, they told me, the breaks are here, 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 and here. And they are soft breaks, meaning you don't have to actually hit your mark on them, but you got to stay close to them. Well, I asked the question one day, why doesn't Rush do that? Why aren't, you keep telling me you want me to do things like Rush does, but he doesn't do that. Why? And the answer was surprising, and the answer came from Rich Hawkins, who was my GM at the time, and he explained to me that the way that the books were kept at the time, the rating books, were in 15-minute increments. And so Rush Limbaugh had actually invented this system where by going past a quarter after, by going past 20 after, anybody who's listening and writing in the books, they're going to write 2 quarters listening. So he gets a half hour of time spent listening when it was really maybe they just tuned in for the first segment. It was brilliant. So things like that you can learn. You also learn things that you don't want to do. I could spend hours on that, but, you hear things that maybe you do in your show and you think, oh, that sounds terrible. And then you realize, wait, I do that too. And so you kind of learn back and forth, and it's interesting experience sometimes to listen to other shows. There aren't a lot of shows that I listen to radio-wise. Bill, Steve. We actually have a local show here that I listen to, although I listen to it on the stream. I don't tune in on the radio. I don't listen to Seattle talk radio because, and I say this with love, it's terrible, but that's a story for another day. There is a show that's out there, and I'm going to tell you, I'm not a radio listener. I do listen to the show occasionally on podcast. I would rate it as probably my 5th choice if I'm out walking and there's no Bill Mick live, there's no Steve, there's no Chabad. When I get down to the what else is left, I will load up the Jesse Kelly podcast. Now, there are a lot of things I like about the Jesse Kelly show. I think the biggest thing I like about his show is that he hates callers to the show. I thought I was a lone eagle on this whole thing until I heard Jesse Kelly talking about it. Callers to radio shows, I know I know how you think this, that callers to radio shows are terrible. Hey, am I on the air? Hey, is this Dave? Is this, what's the famous call we had? Is this Dave? Yeah, after we changed the name of the show. Thanks, Dave. I really like your show. I really hated that Dave Diamond guy, but you're really good. Callers tend to be distractive. They tend to be off topic. They tend to be disorganized. They're terrible for the flow of a show. And Jesse Kelly makes that clear. He talks about it. He talks about the fact that you callers suck and don't call here. If you call here and say, hi, Jesse, how you doing? I'll hang up on you. And I like that. I know a lot of people don't, but I do. And I appreciate that about his show. He also has this green sky theory where basically we're being gaslighted into believing things that are not true by the media, which I think is spot on. And he has a metaphor he uses for it, the green sky theory. If you haven't heard it, you can look it up. And it's entertaining the way he does it. He is also, I think, kind of funny. And one of the things that's interesting, I mean, he gets texts he gets tweets and stuff all the time. This guy tweeted him, "You're one sick effing dude." And he replied, "Not sure when I've ever denied that." Former Marine. He's an interesting guy. At the same time that I'd heard of Jesse Kelly, there was a woman that I had never heard of. She's not a radio host, but she's involved in this story. Her name is Haley Carter, and I literally had never heard of her. Literally. No clue who this woman is. Didn't know anything about her. Nothing. Until she suddenly popped up on the Jesse Kelly show. Now, as it turns out, she is a Marine veteran as well. She's a former officer. She's a former professional soccer player. And by the way, she comes from a town called Friendswood, Texas, where they are getting ready to have a 4th of July parade. And they invited her to be the Grand Marshal of the parade. She's from there. This is the important thing to understand. It's a little suburb outside of Houston. And there you go. This woman has the people who are supporting her claim that she's a highly decorated combat veteran. The most important award, the highest award I guess she has, is the Defense, what do they call this, Meritorious Service Medal, which is it's right up there. I mean, no two ways about that. But what you need to understand about the Defense Meritorious Service Medal is that it's awarded in the name of the Secretary of Defense to members of the armed forces who, while serving in a joint activity, distinguish themselves by non-combat outstanding achievement or meritorious service, but not of a degree to award the Defense Superior Service Medal, which is kind of a wordy way of saying in a non-combat role, even in a combat theater, she did something of value. What was that something of value she did? Well, as it turns out, she was the women's assistant soccer coach for the Afghanistan team until that blew up, not literally, but they had some issues with the team. She was not directly involved with those issues, but because of some of the fallout of the issues, she ended up leaving that team to come back to the United States and become a professional soccer player after her military career. Now, all of this means something. Haley Carter is an activist, a political activist. She is very pro-LGBT. While I have not read anything that says that she specifically herself is, she's very supportive of it. She may be, for all I know, and I frankly don't care. I really don't. But she's a big supporter of LGBTQ community. And she is one of the leaders of an organization called Vets for Gun Reform, which, of course, is an anti-gun lobbying position. Now, the important thing to understand here is that she's from Friendswood, Texas, and she was invited to be the Grand Marshal of the Friendswood, Texas, a little suburb outside of southwest side of Houston, the Grand Marshal of their parade. And Jesse Kelly, on the air, took exception to this. He followed that up with a pair of tweets in which he said, quote, "Communists are in blood red areas too. Friendswood, Texas is a blood red city." Now I'm going to stop right there and say, not quite true. It's a suburb of Houston, and if you look at the maps that show how people are voting, it's kind of a light, almost transparent blue, meaning it's not blood red. They chose, continuing on, they chose Haley Carter to be Grand Marshal of the July 4th parade. She's a gun grabber. She's into drag. She's into trans activism. Then he put out the number of the Friendswood Parks Department and demanded his callers let them know. And because talk radio audiences are very responsive, and God bless you for that, by the way, this is one of the reasons why advertisers love talk radio, even though they have to pretend to hate it when something stupid happens. Talk radio listeners are very loyal, and of course they did. They inundated the Friendswood Parks Department, but they went a step further. Jesse Kelly, also, if you're looking at the video there in the lower right-hand corner, tweeted a picture of her child, Haley Carter's child. He put a picture of her child in Las Vegas and left it up there. Now, of course, in this era of internet sleuthing, internet, whatever, it didn't take long before Jesse Kelly's Twitter followers and presumably listeners found out Haley Carter's information, and they began to contact her directly, sending her threats. Some of those threats involved violence, and some of those threats involved things that are inappropriate. Moreover, we're talking about involving a child here. The same argument has been made in the past about, leave the Bush's children out of it, leave Barron out of things. And yet, when push came to shove, a right-wing conservative host, Jesse Kelly, and he won't deny that, he'll say, yeah, I'm right-wing, published a picture of the child on the internet and urged his followers to take action. Now, he didn't urge them to contact her directly. There's no two ways about that. But, things happen because this is the 21st century and people find these things out. Over the course of a few days, there were threats, there were controversies, there were all kinds of things. And at the end of the day, Haley Carter decided that she was not going to be, and keep in mind, she's a professional soccer player from Friendswood, Texas, who played for the Houston team. So it's not like people in Houston don't know who she is. I don't know who she is because A, I don't live in Texas, B, I don't care about soccer. I'd never heard of her until this. But she decided after all of this that it's just not worth it. It's not worth the threats. It's not worth the problems. It's not worth all of this. And before you say to me, oh, that doesn't happen, I had an incident here on Saturday in which I ran into a person who, I can't tell you all the details yet. Eventually I will be able to, but I ran into a person who believed that because of the Roe decision, certain actions should be taken. And I ran into another person who was blustery about that. Oh, they want to take those actions? Let them come. But I also noted he was wearing body armor at a parade. So it's kind of weird. At any rate, Haley Carter decided it just wasn't worth all that, so she stepped down. She said, I'm not gonna host the parade in my hometown on the 4th of July. And Kelly's response to that was to tweet a picture of a man walking away from an explosion, and he wrote simply, update, she's gone. That's it. That's the whole story. That's the whole, I guess if you want to argue about it, that's the whole thing. And I read this and I thought to myself, I like Jesse's show, I clearly don't agree with Haley Carter on her political positions on anything. However, she did wear the uniform, and she did serve. And I have respect for people that do that. I object to her being called a decorated combat veteran. She is decorated, and she is a veteran, and she was in a combat zone, so was I. But that doesn't necessarily equate to you're a war hero. So the whole problem with this is I don't have any objection to discussing whether or not she was the right choice for the Friendswood, Texas 4th of July parade. I could argue that who cares? It's Friendswood, Texas. I'm A, never going to go there, and B, it doesn't matter. But to Jesse Kelly, this was obviously so important that he decided to do this. I wonder how many people around the country, how many towns around the country he went to and said, okay, who's your grand marshal, and does it meet with my approval or not? If you want to spend your time as a host doing that, that's your prerogative. I have problems with the fact that he posted a picture of the child. Is there anything good out of all this? No, there's no good. I wish I could sit here and tell you there's a great solution to all this. We all learned a lesson, but we didn't. Reality is reality. Every talk show host says, oh, I'm completely independent. Nobody in the company tells me what to say. As I said, reality is different because that's not true. Every host is not completely independent. Every host works for a company. And the first conversation I had about this story was, can't believe that company isn't going to do that company that this guy works for is very LGBTQ friendly. Are they really going to just stand by and not do anything? Really, the only one who could do that was Rush Limbaugh, and Rush Limbaugh didn't care. Little lesser degree Hannity, because they were wealthy enough that they didn't care. That's what happened in 2008 with the Sandra Fluke thing. Your boycotts and all that crap didn't hurt Rush Limbaugh at all. The people it hurt was me. The people that it hurt was KFIV. That's who it hurt. And it didn't change anything with Sean Hannity, but that's another story. Employers look at employees, which most talk show hosts are. Very few talk show hosts are quote-unquote independent. And when an employee does something that puts the company in a bad light, they're going to have problems with that. And so I don't think that there's not going to be any fallout from this. Something's going to happen. Whether or not we ever learn about it, it's another story. But there's a bigger issue in play here to me with the Jesse Kelly story, with the Jesse Kelly Haley Carter story, and that is simply this. Was a line crossed in posting the picture of that child? Again, I don't have any problem with you objecting to Haley Carter being the Grand Marshal of the Friendswood, Texas 4th of July parade. I think it's somewhat hypocritical if you're not going to go to, I don't know, Leavenworth, Washington, or, Fort Scott, Kansas, or wherever, Norman, Oklahoma, and do the same thing. But be that as it may, and Jesse Kelly is based out of Houston, which despite his protests is not a blood red city. At the end of the day, you're left with this question. I mean, here's a guy that's on the air telling me all the time about his faith, his belief in his faith, his belief in his God, his belief in his religion. He contrasts that, of course, with his vehement anti-communism, and God bless him for it. But was a line crossed with that child? Does his faith actually teach him to do that? It's the old question. Wwjd, what would Jesus do? In the same circumstances, would Jesus have posted a picture of that child and said, here's the number, go call. Here's the way to handle this. Here's what I want you to do. I don't think so, based on my readings. I don't believe that's the case. But I wonder if Jesse Kelly is having any second thoughts about, maybe I took that a little too far. Maybe I shouldn't have posted the picture of the child. If he learns from that, great. If not, well, just more polarization of the country. But here's what I do know. If that's what your faith teaches you, if that's what Christianity really is, posting pictures of children on the internet just because you disagree with what the parent's doing with that child, I don't like how that parent is parenting that child, so I'm going to put this on the internet. See, she's a pedophile because she's taking her kid to Vegas in front of a drag show. I don't think that's what Jesus would have done. I don't think you can stand there and say to me, this is my faith. This is what my faith teaches me. Because if that's what your faith teaches you, and I don't really care what your faith is, if that's what your faith teaches you, that it's okay to attack through a child, I'm glad I'm not your faith, because I wouldn't last long in it.